So this is what it's like trying to get a picture of the sunset on the Clingman Stone Road. It's about 4:30, December 13th, 2014, and I am sitting at what I assume to be Collins Gap on the Clingman Stone Road, which is closed for the winter. I am staying at the Mount Collins shelter, which is about a mile back from the direction that I came, going back towards Newfound Gap. So I'm maybe 3 miles from Clingman's Dome, or a little less than that. And there's nobody else around. There are 3 other guys that I'm aware of staying at the shelter, but they came up for a little look around and then went back. And so I am here by myself waiting a little bit longer to set up a shot for the sunset. According to the research that I did before I came, the sun is supposed to set at about 5:20, and because of the elevation of the mountains behind Clingman's Dome, it may set a little bit sooner than that. It looks like the sun is going to go down behind Mount Buckley. I think the mountains that are sort of northwest of Clingman's Dome are Mount Love and Mount Buckley. And when I looked at a compass earlier, it looked like that was kind of due west or southwest. So that's what I'm expecting. From this view, looking off to the northwest, looking into the Tennessee side, you can see Thunderhead, which is maybe the tallest peak in the western section of the park, at about 5,400 feet. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in this video, but that's on the horizon. And then you're sort of looking down into the Elkmont section of the park. So on the way up here, I also looked at places to potentially come back for sunrise tomorrow, and the sun is supposed to be up at about 7:30. There is a clearing beside the road that looks east back towards those peaks in North Carolina that I mentioned, and so if things go according to plan, I will get up and leave the shelter around 6 and give myself about 30 minutes to get up to that clearing before the sun comes up. Anyway, I'm going to wait a little bit longer and then go set up for a sunset shot, and we'll see how it comes out. So right now it's about 10 till 5, and I have moved over to the other side of the road facing kind of generally west. I've tried a few shots and compositions that I kind of like, and I'm going to try this one here. I like the way that the sun is kind of off to the left of the frame and the trees are silhouetted in the foreground. One of the problems that I'm having, seem to have with this lens, or maybe just something that happens when you're shooting straight towards the sun, is I have a lot of lens flare in the bottom right. I may or may not be able to get that out in Photoshop, but sometimes it's a nice effect, just depending on how much of it there is. The other thing I'm doing is I'm doing what's called bracketing, and that is a matter of shooting several exposures of the same shot, and both over and under exposing to try to make sure you have the full range of light in a scene. And particularly in a sunrise or sunset, there's such a wide dynamic range, or range of dark and light tones, that it's almost impossible to get it all in one exposure. Something is either going to be underexposed or overexposed. So if you shoot multiple exposures, you can pick and choose, and sometimes you can combine them in various ways in Photoshop to get the full dynamic range from the scene. So I have this camera set up right now to shoot 5 exposures And the way this particular camera works is it shoots the average exposure first, and then it shoots 2 stops below, 1 stop below, 1 stop above, and 2 stops above. So you can kind of see in the right side of the frame, if I go back and look at that last image, there's this lens flare that looks like it's laser beams or something shooting across the front of the tree. So not sure if I'll be able to use that particular shot. One of the other things that I'm doing for shooting directly into the sun is I'm shooting at a very small aperture at f/22, and one of the effects of shooting at a small aperture like that is you get this sort of starburst pattern with the sun, which adds a little bit of drama to it. And so really I think all you have to do that is shoot at what's called stop down, or very small aperture. The higher the number with f-stop, the smaller the opening in the shutter that lets light in. So that's kind of what makes that happen. Actually the color of the sky will get better as the sun gets the closest to the horizon, or even drops behind the horizon at twilight for a good period of time after the sun goes down. The color is usually better, and sometimes it's easier to get an exposure without so much lens flare. So you can see I'm set up on a tripod, and I'm off on the Tennessee side of the road, and waiting a little bit longer for the sun to drop. And then once I shoot the sunset, I'll probably shoot a few twilight shots and then start heading back to the shelter. I'm probably about a mile away, and I've got flashlight and headlamp in case I need it. There's not much of a moon. I think it's a waning moon past the full moon and getting smaller, and it may already have set because the time is a little skewed after the full moon. So I should be able to see pretty well without lights, but when I get off of the road, I've got to do about half a mile or so on the AT, so it'll be darker there. So it should work out to get back to the shelter about the right time for shooting some stars. Well, good morning. It is Sunday, December 14th, 2014, a little after 6 in the morning, and I am hiking up from the Mount Collins shelter back up to the Clingman's Dome Road, where I saw an eastern view yesterday afternoon that looked like it would be promising for sunrise, and it is probably in the temperature probably in the teens and not very windy, at least on this sheltered side of the ridge. What I'm hoping to find when I get up there is maybe some morning twilight shots before the sun comes up. The sun comes up at 7:30 this morning, according to my research, so I think it's probably about a 30-minute hike, maybe a little more than that. So that should give me a little time, if there's some pre-sunrise color in the sky, and give me time to set up a shot and get the composition I want, and then just start shooting. So hopefully after that there'll be some nice early morning shots with good light even after the sun comes up on the way back down. So that's my goal for this morning. So this is my spot. This is maybe half a mile from the junction of the Fork Ridge Trail with Clingman's Dome Road, where it connects to the AT from the shelter. And you can see this is pre-sunrise twilight, looking east to south, most likely. And based on what I looked at yesterday, most of these peaks are on the Blue Ridge Parkway or beyond into North Carolina. You can't see the peaks in the foreground, but this is most likely looking down towards the Deep Creek section of the park, which is above Bryson City, North Carolina. So I'm going to take some test shots and get set up and wait for the sun to come up. So it's about 10 minutes before sunrise, and I have moved the camera around and taken a few different shots of the twilight. There's not much going on in the sky. There are no clouds, so I am shooting more foreground in the composition than the sky, just because I think it will be more interesting, and I'll still have the benefit of the color of the sky. But I am also bracketing multiple exposures like I did last night for sunset, so that I can get the full range of dark and light, and I will look at ways to combine those exposures in Photoshop. So I'm on the way out. I just came from the AT back to the Clingman's Dome Road. It's 10:30, 11 o'clock. I kind of goofed off a little bit back at the shelter and had some breakfast, and looked at my pictures from this trip. And this is where the AT connects to the Clingman's Dome Road. It's across from a trail called the Fork Ridge Trail. I've not been on this trail before, but it looks like it connects down into the Deep Creek area. On the North Carolina side, this is the road going back up to Clingman's Dome, and I'm going this way. This is probably about a 4-mile hike, patchy snow, but temperatures are warming up, so it may be a little slushy. All in all, I think I had a successful trip. I accomplished what I intended to accomplish if the pictures come out. What I try to do when I take these 1 or 2 night overnight trips is be somewhere where there is a peak for sunset and sunrise. They may or may not be the same peak. And ideally, if the weather is clear, I try to work on star pictures and just shoot whatever else is interesting when the light permits it. And ideally that's early and late in the day when the light is not too harsh. But more often than not, the weather doesn't cooperate, or it's rainy, or it's cloudy, or one or all of those objectives are compromised because of that, because it may be clear enough for sunset and then cloud up overnight, not have an opportunity for sunrise. But in this case, the weather was very clear for all three of those things, and what I'd hoped to do was get to the shelter, drop my gear, grab the camera stuff, and keep going up the Clingman Stone Road to see if there were views east or west or both that were within reasonable walking distance from the shelter, and that proved to be the case. I don't know what the name of the clearing was that faced east. I believe the one that faced west that I took sunset pictures from last night was Collins Gap, and so I found both of those places within a reasonably short distance, and the other bonus was it was clear enough around the Mount Collins shelter to shoot star pictures from there. The trees were open enough around that shelter that it had a clear view of the sky, and the stars were incredible last night, very distinct and clear. You could see satellites and airplanes going over and some shooting stars. Some of those things may show up in the Star Trails picture if it comes out. They're usually pretty distinct paths through the sky, and sometimes different colors too. So, and for sunrise this morning, it was a little closer to the shelter than Collins Gap, so it wasn't a bad walk. It wasn't very windy. Wind can be problematic for photos because things are blurry if they're moving around, and sometimes you can compensate for that, sometimes you can't. But it was very still this morning and very little motion, so hopefully the images will be pretty sharp. And I should be back in Newfound Gap by around noon, or a little before that. Talk to you later.